Assalamualaikum, have a good day everyone. So today we are going to continue the new subtopic, chapter 3, the 3.1 about the structure of plasma membrane. So before we start, let me discuss about the importance of the movement, the substances across the plasma membrane. The movement of substances into and out of the cell is regulated by the plasma membrane. So the living cells require substance from the external environment to carry out the living processes and also have to dispose the waste from the cell. So the cell must allow some substance to move into and out of the cell to maintain the living processes. This is the structure of plasma membrane. It consists of the structure of channel protein. We have the carrier protein. We have glycoprotein, glycolipids, carbohydrate. We have cholesterol here. And this is the structure, the phospholipid. And once we are talking to the both sides, we are talking about the phospholipid bilayer. So according to the fluid mosaic model, protein molecules float within the phospholipid bilayer, forming a mosaic pattern that changes frequently. So in details, let me discuss together. Phospholipid molecule consists of the polar head and non-polar tail. A polar head which is called hydrophilic or attracted to water, meanwhile a non-polar tail which is hydrophobic repels water. As you can see in this diagram, the tail of the phospholipid molecules, the layers face each other. This is the diagram that shows the head of the phospholipid molecule in the outer layer face the extracellular fluid. Meanwhile, the phospholipid head in the inner layer face the cytoplasm. So this is the arrangement of the phospholipid bilayer. Let me discuss about the type of protein. The protein molecules are widely dispersed between the phospholipid bilayer. It consists of the channel protein and the carrier protein. The channel protein is a protein molecule with a channel or a canal. Here, dia ada satu saluran yang straight sahaja. Meanwhile, the carrier protein that functions as carrier. It is about the glycoprotein and glycolipid. Glycolipid is when the lipid attached to the carbohydrate. So it is called a glycolipid. Here, the green one, this is the structure of the glycolipid because the carbohydrate here attached to the lipids, the phospholipids. So we call it as the glycolipid. Meanwhile, this is the structure of glycoprotein. When the protein attached to the carbohydrate, so it is called the glycoprotein. The functions of glycoprotein and glycolipid. Glycoprotein and glycolipid act as a receptor to the hormone such as insulin, act as the antigen for the cell identification, and stabilize the membrane by forming the hydrogen bond with water. This is the functions of cholesterol. Before that, what is cholesterol? Cholesterol is the molecule that found between the phospholipid, the yellow one color. So, the functions of the cholesterol makes the phospholipid bilayer stronger, more flexible, and less permeable to water, soluble substances such as ions. Furthermore, we are going to discuss about the permeability of a plasma membrane. Plasma membrane has a selective permeable. Permeable means allow all substance to pass through it freely, while impermeable means do not allow or unable, the substance is unable to move across it. Meanwhile, for the selective permeable, it is called only allow free movement to certain molecule to across it and prevent or limit the movements of other substances. Now let me discuss the subtopic 3.2 about the concept of movements of substances across a plasma membrane. It involves the non-polar molecule that consists of the fatty acid, cholesterol, vitamin A, D, E, and K, which is the fat-soluble vitamins, and the steroid compound. The another two types is the small molecule and ions, consists of the polar molecules, non-polar molecules, ions. And also another one is the large molecule that consists of the glucose and amino acid. There are two types of transport that involved in the movements of substances across the plasma membrane. The first one is passive transport and second one is active transport. What is passive transport? Passive transport do not use or involve the usage of energy. They are divided into three types. The first one is simple diffusion, osmosis, and facilitated diffusion. Here is an example for the simple diffusion. So what is simple diffusion? Simple diffusion is the movements of molecule or ion from an area that high concentration to a low concentration. Iaitu pergerakan molekul dari kawasan yang banyak tekanan tinggi pergi ke kawasan yang lebih rendah. So the moving of molecule are said to move down the concentration gradient until a dynamic equilibrium is achieved. So this may occur with or without the presence of plasma membrane. Lipid soluble molecule such as fatty acid and glycerol, oxygen and carbon dioxide diffuse through the phospholipid bilayers by simple diffusion. What is osmosis? Osmosis is a passive transport process that is similar to diffusion, but is only involve water molecule only. Ia hanya melibatkan pergerakan atau perubahan molekul air sahaja. The selective permeable membrane is permeable to water but impermeable to some solute such as sucrose molecule. The same situation occurs in cell through the phospholipid. So what is osmosis? It is a net movement of water molecule from an area of high water potential to the low water potential area through a selective permeable membrane. So the selective permeable membrane is the permeable to water but impermeable to some solids such as sucrose molecules. Now let we discuss about facilitated diffusion. Facilitated diffusion do not require energy because the transport protein transport molecule down a concentration gradient. So same goes to the osmosis and the simple diffusion. The process will continue until reach equilibrium when the concentrations of molecule is same at both sides, iaitu kedua-dua kawasan tersebut adalah sama kepekatan molekulnya. So, for lipid insoluble molecules such as ion and large molecules such as amino acid and glucose unable to pass through the phospholipid bilayer. So, this type of the molecule have to use the facilitated diffusion. Consists of the carrier or the channel protein, and this process is known as the facilitated diffusion. Channel protein is a formed channel or the canal to allow the small size solute to cross the plasma membrane. The channel has specific internal characteristics only allow the specific ions to pass through it. Meanwhile, for the carrier protein, have the specific site can only bind to a specific site molecule, and for example, glucose only can bind to the specific site of a glucose carrier protein. Now let me discuss about the active transport. This is the characteristic of active transport. The movements of molecule or ion against the concentration gradient. Dia berlawanan dengan sifat passive transport tadi. And it is require energy, perlukan tenaga in form of ATP that generated during the cellular respiration. And it requires specific carrier protein with a specific site to bind with a certain molecule ions. Pumps in the active transport. The active transport results in the accumulation or excretions of molecule or ion in a cell. The carrier protein involved in active transport are known as pump. So for example, in the animal cell, the carrier protein that transports sodium ion to the extracellular means out of the cell, and the potassium ion into the cell are called sodium-potassium pump. Let me discuss about the sodium-potassium pump. Number one is about when the condition outside of the cell or in the extracellular fluid with high sodium concentration So what will happen is the 3 sodium ion will bind to the carrier protein that happen inside the cell. After that, the ATP molecule will decompose into ADP and phosphate. Right? So the phosphate group is bound to the carrier protein. Phosphate bond will provide energy and change the shape of carrier protein. This will help the sodium ion transport out from the cell through the carrier protein. When 2 potassium ions from the outside of the cell bind with a carrier protein, the phosphate group leaves the carrier protein. Once the phosphate leaves the carrier protein, alright, so it lost the phosphate group, restore the original shape of the carrier protein, so that the potassium ion is transported to the carrier protein into the cells. There are another types of pump known as the proton pump. Okay, for example, the proton pump that are found on the epithelial cell lining in the stomach cavity. The proton pump causes the acidity of the stomach content. The energy from the ATP enables the hydrogen ion to be transported by carrier protein towards the extracellular fluid. So this causes an accumulation of the hydrogen ion and acid production in the stomach cavity. Last but not least is about the similarities and differences between passive and active transport. The similarities for both types of transport is both are moving a substance across a plasma membrane and also occur through a selective permeable membrane. Meanwhile, the differences is the energy is needed in the active transport, meanwhile in the passive transport do not need energy. Passive transport occurs following the concentration gradient. Meanwhile, for the active transport, against the concentration gradient. At the end of the process, passive transport will occur until achieve the dynamic equilibrium. Meanwhile, the active transport will result the accumulation and disposal molecule or ion. So with that, thank you very much and have a nice day. Hope to see you again.